The US government says China is detaining more than 2 million Uyghurs, ethnic Kazakhs and other Muslim minorities. Is this the world's biggest, most ignored human rights crisis? I'll ask a Uyghur activist. Also on the show, the UK is trying to quit the European Union. But was the original Brexit referendum tainted? That's our debate. According to the US State Department, more than 2 million members of Muslim ethnic minorities are being held by the Chinese government in so-called re-education camps against their will, including 800,000 Uyghurs. Activists say it's part of a long-running government campaign to suppress, torture and humiliate the Uyghurs. The Chinese government say they're fighting terrorism, even as they send Communist Party officials to live inside of Uyghur homes. But is the world even paying attention? Joining me to discuss this human rights crisis is Ilshat Hassan, a Uyghur activist who was forced to leave China. Ilshat Hassan, thanks for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you for having me.
You're a Uyghur activist who fled China in 2003. How bad has the situation become in Xinjiang province, the historic Uyghur homeland, in more recent months and years? Do you recognize these horrific numbers from the US State Department? 800,000 Uyghurs in re-education camps, more than 2 million members of Muslim minorities detained in total. The numbers sound almost unbelievable.
Yes, actually after the 4th of December, the Tuesday, State Department official Scott Besby gave a testimony in Capitol Hill, and a lot of news media pick up the 800,000 Uyghur. Actually, it's more than 2 million, because Uyghur is a major population over there.
In Xinjiang, they're the biggest group. What are you hearing from your friends and family back home in Xinjiang about what's going on inside those camps? Because the Chinese government say there have been violent attacks by Uyghur separatists, so they're just de-radicalizing the terrorists there, they say. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says these policies are about improving livelihoods and preserving stability. What do you say in response to that?
To that, we have a lot of testimony, witness testimony, and also we have the first-hand information from the Chinese government's website and their information. And I will ask them, what the president of Xinjiang University, what's the medical university president, and Kashgar University's president, they need from this vocational education camp.
They're in the camps as well.
Yeah, they're in the camps as well. Clearly. And how can they become a terrorist if they can promote it to the Xinjiang University's president, which means it's a provincial level party member, also must be Communist Party member, which means the Communist Party members become terrorists. Wow. Now need to go to the
what's happening in those camps? Are we talking about, what are we talking about? There's testimony of torture?
Yes, it's by the State Department's official, relentless indoctrination and harsh condition inside. And with Mikhail Tursun's testimony, they are enforcing torture and hunger, not giving them enough food, not enough water, and sometimes forcing them to take medicine, unknown medicine, and after that, from the woman's testimony, they lost the pregnancy, most of them, and some kids died over there, and that is. And in one cell, with Mikhail Tursun's description, they have more than 60 around the people inside, and some have to be stand up.
And these testimonies are coming from people who have been released and come out.
Yes, Mikhail Tursun, left China. Now we have 4: Mikhail Tursun, Ömer Bek, and Sayra Gül, and another one lady. Now he is in Turkey. So now we have 4.
So the numbers we're seeing, the conditions that are getting harsher, this is an escalating trend clearly, but it's not new. The repression of the Uyghurs has been going on for decades.
Oh, yes.
Tell me about what happened to you. You were a Uyghur activist in China in the 80s and 90s. What happened to you?
Yeah, starting very early in 2000, they started to abolish the Uyghur language teaching in the college, university, and they always have the very strong discrimination. For example, I was teacher in a college, a vocational training college. That's the real vocational. And regularly, the police will visit me and bring me to the police station, asking some question. And when I give a class to the students, they will put some students to monitor me. And they arrested me twice and beating me. And my tooth was beaten out, broken. This is one. And they used the electric, the baton. And they electrocuted me twice in one interrogation.
When was this roughly?
It was in 2001.
And what happened to your family? Did your family suffer as well?
My brother was killed by the Chinese mob in 2004 after I left. And my sister was get arrested because of my activism in 2014. And now I got lost with all my family members. Now I don't know if my mom, she's still alive. My sister is still alive. My ex-wife lost contact. And my kid, I got him after 10 years in 2013 in Malaysia. And my uncle, because I sent him some money and some some clothes, and his two sons in 2009, two sons was get arrested and they were beaten, tortured, and detained for without any charge, just because I sent money and sent some parcel to them.
If I talk to other Uyghurs living in exile, this is a common experience?
Everyone has stories like this? That is a common experience.
What seems to be going on in Xinjiang in recent weeks, if some of the media reports from the Associated Press and others are to be believed, is that this is going beyond discrimination into something we've not seen pretty much anywhere else in the world. There are reports that the Chinese Communist Party has sent more than 1 million local government workers to literally live inside of Uyghur homes, to watch them eat, pray, raise their kids, to monitor them 24/7, even in private. It sounds not just crazy, it sounds Orwellian.
Yes. It was always monitoring the Uyghurs. That was a common practice in the Chinese government for the Uyghur. If you say no, you are extremism. And they can label you and they can send you to a concentration camp or sentence you because just say you don't like them. And they will leave you 24 hours. And one time they go, at least have to live in their Uyghurs' home for 2 weeks. And a lot of the family, the husband, the son, the man was always into the concentration camp. Only left the woman and the daughters and the young small kids. And they are taking this advantage. I heard some of them raping the woman.
But is it, from what you're hearing, and obviously these are second-hand reports from things you're hearing from other activists, other exiles, is this increasing in number? Are there more people going to more homes now?
Yes. When it started 2 years ago, it was just some family, they think it's targeted and they needed to monitor more closely. Now, it was all Uyghur family. And 3 years ago, first time what I heard is, before they send the cadres to Uyghur's house, in the Kashgar and Khotan, they request Uyghur, all villagers, you cannot lock your door inside when you are asleep at night.
Wow.
You have to open it. And the police can anytime come into your house in midnight, ask all your family to go outside to wait in the courtyard. They will search your home.
What are they looking for?
Anything, prayer rags or Qurans or any Uyghur alphabet letter written books.
So what do you want the US government, Muslim majority countries which have been very silent about all this, the international community, the UN, what do you want them to do to help Uyghurs in Xinjiang? How do you put pressure on a country as powerful as China, as economically dominant in the global economy as China?
Currently, for example, the U.S. government having some trade war with China. And if it's combined with the human rights, include Uyghur, Tibet issue, I am pretty sure that the U.S. government will stand on the high ground of the morality and can mobilize all the Western countries, give some sanction to the Chinese government who is responsible for this atrocity.
You say that, but couldn't it go the other way? Couldn't it be that Donald Trump and President Xi do a deal on trade which involves the Americans looking the other way on what's going on in Xinjiang?
Yes, I'm saying that. That trend, I'm not very optimistic. And Chinese is calculating what the U.S. action. And we already talked about the sanctions 3 months early. And until now, we didn't see any action. And I know if U.S. can sanction some few officials, the rest of the world will follow, and the UN can stand firm in their commitment to the human rights.
Hassan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
French President Emmanuel Macron's government is on the defensive following violent protests against a proposed fuel tax. Macron was supposed to be a hopeful alternative to Europe's right-wing populists. But in this week's reality check, Upfront producer Ryan Cole examines whether the French president really is a hero of the global resistance.
In the age of Donald Trump and rising authoritarianism, many have hailed French President Emmanuel Macron as the savior of the liberal order. Macron even declared himself the main opponent of Europe's nationalist populist. But is he really? Well, since assuming power, Macron has passed a massive and unpopular reconfiguration of France's labor laws by decree. Critics say this weakens collective bargaining rights and decreases workers' security. Macron simply dismissed the naysayers as slackers. His contempt for some of the inconveniences of French democracy extend beyond the workplace. In the aftermath of the horrific 2015 terror attack in Paris, strict state of emergency laws were implemented. Macron, however, has now incorporated these provisions into ordinary law. As a result, authorities have been gifted draconian powers to curb the rights of individuals suspected of having links to terrorist networks, all without any independent judicial oversight. The ombudsman, Jacques Toubon, the man in charge of defending civil liberties, warned these policies stigmatize Muslims and threaten social cohesion. Refugees haven't fared so well in Macron's France either. Yes, the occasional refugee has been fast-tracked to citizenship because they went viral scaling a building and saving a child, but most haven't been so lucky. Last August, Macron passed a law reducing the number of days one has to apply for asylum from 120 to 90. And asylum seekers whose applications are rejected can be deported before the asylum court has the chance to rule on their appeal. As for freedom of the press, Macron doesn't always support those seeking to hold power to account. In July, it was revealed that one of his bodyguards violently attacked 2 protesters while illegally disguised as a police officer. Macron attacked journalists reporting on the unfolding scandal, saying that France has a press that is no longer pursuing the truth, a media power that wants to become a judicial power. The remarker in Macron a swift rebuke from Human Rights Watch, who said his arguments were dangerous rhetoric while journalists around the world are coming under fire from populist leaders and other autocrats who wish to discredit or prevent all criticism of power. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Macron presidency is that threats to liberal democracy do not always come from the political extremes. They can arise from the left, the right, and yes, the center.
Claims of illegal campaign overspending, of Russian interference, of data theft. Was the 2016 Brexit referendum in the UK a free and fair vote? As Britain prepares to leave the European Union next March, there's a growing chorus of voices calling for a second referendum, partly on the grounds that the first one may have been illegitimate. One of the reporters who has broken most of the stories related to Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, and the possible role of Russian money in that 2016 vote is the Observer journalist Carol Cadwallader. She joins me now from London. And from Brussels, member of the European Parliament Stephen Woolfe, a long-standing Brexit supporter and former member of UKIP, the UK Independence Party. Thank you both for joining me on Upfront. Carol, let me start with you. As a result of your own investigative journalism, you have criticised the way in which the Brexit referendum in the summer of 2016 was conducted. That's when 52% of the public voted to leave, as opposed to 48% who voted to stay. Do you believe that Brexit vote was tainted?
Well, I think it's absolutely... We know that the vast majority of people voted the way that they did because of their very strong and genuine views. That is absolutely not in doubt, and I'd never question that at all. There are now multiple criminal investigations. I think the last count I did, there are actually 9 ongoing serious or criminal investigations into laws that were broken during the campaign. So that includes illegal overspending, illegal coordination of campaigns, illegal use of data. And then we've got the extraordinary revelation that the biggest sum of money spent during the referendum campaign that was supplied by Aaron Banks, this Bristol businessman who supported Nigel Farage's campaign. The Electoral Commission looked at that donation for a year. They've investigated it for an entire year. And at the end of it, they said, we're not sure where that money came from. And we're not even sure that it's British.
OK. Stephen Wolfe, did you win that vote in 2016 fair and square? Carol talks about all the illegality that's now associated with your pro-Brexit campaign.
Of course, we absolutely won fair and square. I think I'm pleased that Carol actually said that people's votes were based on opinions that they'd previously formed. There is no way that I was campaigning in the streets of the north of England, in Lee and Blackpool and the Midlands or the hometowns that I grew up in, that we were being funded by the Russians, had some sort of dark money from some organizations in the United States. But where I do have a problem with Carol's assessment is there was no connection between Vote Leave and Leave.eu. In fact, there was the opposite. There was a complete hatred between those like Aaron Banks and those who were leading the Vote Leave campaign. There was no way in heaven that these people would have been collaborating with one another.
Stephen, what about Carol's point about overspending? Both Leave EU and Vote Leave were fined and reported to the police by the Electoral Commission. That's a fact, isn't it?
The main thrust of Carol's argument is that Nigel Farage was involved in some sort of illicit campaign with the Russians to fund a campaign to undermine British democracy. And if that is the main case about it, then that is palpably wrong, because that is never what I campaigned on, never what the millions of people that I and the people involved in UKIP met and worked with.
OK, Carol, is that palpably wrong? Is that your main case, and is that palpably wrong?
The vast majority of people, this made absolutely no difference at all to. But what is key here is that they weren't targeted by these advertisements. That is not where the money was spent. All of the money in the referendum was spent in locating a few people who are called the persuadables. And they were the people who were targeted with a fire hose of disinformation in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. And that was where the money was spent. It's the fact that it's just so essential that if you're going to have a referendum that is going to affect the foundation, the constitution of our country forever, you better do that within the law. And we know that is not the case. We know that multiple laws were broken and an investigation is ongoing into multiple other laws that might have been broken.
Stephen, what about Aaron Banks, this multi-millionaire businessman who's been donating to UKIP and to pro-Brexit causes for years now? You know him. You were at the top of UKIP for a while. We've seen all these ties now coming out between Aaron Banks and sources in Russia. Did you know about them when you were working alongside him?
Well, look, I never knew about his various meetings with the Russian ambassador, but he never knew about meetings that I had with a variety of people in the various campaigns. What I do know is that he did meet these people. Carol has pointed these out. But at no stage has anybody ever said that what he's done is illegal. There are investigations. And that is the point here. We can't just run a witch hunt based upon the idea of evidence that is being pulled together by people that's never been convicted.
If I may, Stephen.
Carol, you've not convicted these people. It's not been proved in a court of law.
There are 3 investigations now that the Electoral Commission carried out and that it has concluded and that is now passed to the Metropolitan Police. So that is overspending by Leave EU, overspending by Vote Leave and overspending by Believe. Yeah. And the Electoral Commission has now concluded those investigations to a criminal level of proof, and it's passed those over to the Metropolitan Police. So we can say definitively that yes, actually, those laws were broken, and that has been proved.
Stephen?
No, Carol. Come on, let's be fair about this. This is not beyond a criminal level of proof, because the Electoral Commission doesn't have a criminal level of proof. If it did, it wouldn't pass it on to the Metropolitan Police in the first place. What they're saying is they have evidence that they believe doesn't fit their particular view, which is
they've ruled. They are the government regulator,
the process
and they
is
have
different.
ruled
it's not saying that
the law was broken. They are the official regulator appointed by the government.
Yes, the rules are broken.
That is what their ruling says.
But
no,
Carol,
it's not rules, it's laws. Laws were broken. Laws were broken.
There is a difference.
That is what the Electoral Commission has said.
Hold on, Stephen, make your point.
Carol, I appreciate that you've interrupted me about 16 times there. In the UK, we have very different levels. There is a civil liability law and there are criminal laws. And in the civil liability law, that is where the Electoral Commission is. They have no criminal powers and no criminal designation of what it is. That's why they've passed it on to Metropolitan Police, because they don't have the powers.
Did UKIP get money from Russian sources, given you got so much money from Arron Banks when you were part of UKIP?
Absolutely not.
How
Nigel
do you know?
said it. Because we wouldn't have been struggling for most of the money that we had in the first place.
Okay, Carol, let me ask you this.
This is where the nonsense comes from, Mehdi.
Okay, well, let's try and get to the bottom of the nonsense. Let's try and get to the bottom of the alleged nonsense. Carol, you've written an article for the New York Review of Books saying Britain needs its own Russia investigation, its own Robert Mueller. But given how controversial and divisive the Mueller investigation has been here in the United States, do you think that'd actually be of any value in the UK?
Well, I think I look at this, the speech the head of MI6 made. It's only his second ever speech since he's been in office. And he pointed to the fact that how MI6 had been involved in the mass expulsion of Russian spies from Britain. And that happened after Sergei Skripal was poisoned. The Foreign Office took this action. Now, one of those people who was expelled from Britain at that time, which MI6 confirmed was a Russian intelligence officer, this is the person who was targeting Arron Banks. And he wasn't just targeting Arron Banks at any old time, he was targeting him in the months before the referendum. And Arron Banks was invited by the Russian ambassador to meet a Russian businessman who offered him these kind of like fantastic gold and diamond deals.
Okay.
And I don't think we can, it's not a question that Russia just like writes a check to a political campaign and that's how it works. What we know from patterns all across Europe is it's about enriching businessmen who then donate to campaigns. It's about offering sweetheart deals. And when we look at when we look at what was proposed to Arron Banks, that just looks like a sweetheart deal. It does.
Stephen, let me ask you this. Given you want to get to the bottom of this like Carol does, would you support a Mueller-style investigation, an independent investigation?
I sound like a Liberal Democrat. The answer is yes, and the answer is no. The answer is yes, because I think it would be farcically show that there was no involvement between UKIP and the Russians or Leave.eu and the Russians, and more importantly, a connection between Vote Leave and Leave.eu. But on the other side of it, it would actually continue the negativity and the divisiveness and the dangerous damage to our political feeling that's happening in the United Kingdom at the moment. And whereas I believe that Carol has a complete duty as a reporter to pursue people like Cambridge Analytica and the case that she's looking at now, but there is a duty on all of us to look at this carefully and responsibly about how we're damaging our democracy when you link things that are not factual with things that are just kind of ideas.
You mentioned damaging democracy. As time goes by, Stephen, as more and more evidence of seeming wrongdoing emerges, more and more questions go unanswered, there does seem to be a momentum growing for a second referendum on Brexit. Sky News did a poll last month that found more than half of Britain support a second referendum. You're a Democrat. What's wrong with having another vote, given all the controversy, given it's nearly 3 years later?
Purely and simply because democracy demands that once you have a vote, you have to enact the decisions of the people. And this view here is different. What's being asked is not to enact leaving the European Union, it's to change your mind before it actually happens. And if you do so, there will be millions of people who still would vote to leave. And I don't want to see that division between families, between rich and poor, between those so-called who don't know what they're talking about and those who believe that they do, continue by trying to usurp that.
Carol, final question to you. You've said that British politics now is, quote, conducted in darkness. In Britain, it's no longer possible to keep money out of politics or even to track it. So given that, a second referendum would probably be, in your view, as compromised and tainted as the first one, wouldn't it? How would you get around that problem, given your own reporting?
Well, I'm not here to campaign for a second referendum. I'm just here to tell you that that was not a free and fair vote. It was not conducted democratically. We can have absolutely no assurance in the outcome of it. And the rest is for politicians to deal with. But yeah, the role of the tech companies, of Facebook and of Google, right at the heart of this, their utter refusal to answer questions to our lawmakers, that is a massive ongoing problem that makes holding a free and fair election in years to come just filled with enormous uncertainty, and that's why it's so important what Parliament is trying to do in trying to hold them to account.
On that note, we'll have to leave it there. Carol, Stephen, thanks for joining me on The Arena. That's our show. Up Front will be back next week.